When we approached you at first with Reveal, it was, some see it as like this Hail Mary. If I can just change the way I say it, all of those deals I'm losing are going to get closed. All of those people not converting are going to convert.
So my kind of definition of messaging is how you articulate most important things about your company or your product and why that matters to your audience.
How important is differentiation in messaging?
One day I do one thing and then the next I do something completely different. I had to remove myself from one industry. I tried to straddle the two for a while, but it's really hard to talk about two different things that you do. It's not like this one magic thing. A unique selling point, I find sometimes a hard concept to grasp because most companies don't have one. It's very rare.
Messaging and positioning, it's very hard to separate the two. How do you separate the two in your work? And what do you do when a company's positioning is not good? Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of our podcast. Today, we have Diane Wiredu. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Diane is here for speaking at a conference, and she's been so kind to extend her stay and join us for this episode. And
Thank you very much.
Of course, I had to come and visit you guys.
Yes, we really appreciate it. And we did a little bit of content at SaaS Talk, but now we get to do a proper deep dive.
That was good. I know.
Now we can sit down.
We're content pros,
exactly.
Right?
Now we can sit down, take it a bit, take more time. It's going to be nice.
Exactly. And I've made the vital error of picking sparkling water for recording. So let's see how many snap edits you're going to see. Diane, about you. So you're a B2B SaaS messaging expert. I have it written here, but I know you. You founded a company called Lionwords.
Yes.
Correct? Which aligns very nicely with the ROAR framework you've developed for messaging. I first met you when we worked on my previous company's messaging at Reveal. And so I got to see firsthand how you think about messaging. And since then, I've been obviously following your journey. You have a background working in translation and working various companies. And then, interestingly enough, you really started with the solopreneur thing very early on.
Yeah.
And since then, you've been helping B2B SaaS companies in particular, various shapes and sizes, I guess, kind of nail their messaging and stand out. So
brilliant intro, by the way.
There we go, right?
Nailed it.
Before we jump in, or as we jump in, we always start with the same question, which is, what's your origin story? I think people would be interested to know how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I think you touched on it really. There were probably like sort of two pivots or two shifts that have led me to the work that I do today. So maybe we can kind of take it back. Kind of my background is in languages. So kind of to know who I am now as like a marketer, I guess you have to know that actually at my core, I'm a linguist. So I studied languages, and then I went and worked in the translation industry. So a lot of my career, the beginning of my career was in translation. And so within that industry, I had a number of roles. So I started off as a project manager for the marketing team. So we used to lead marketing translation campaigns, marketing campaigns into 20 plus languages. I then managed a media team. So I had a dubbing team, dubbing studio, subtitling, all that kind of stuff, which was really fun. And then I kind of went out on my own. And so I went out into kind of freelance translation. So I think that background for me, I've always loved like language and really believed in the power of words. And I think that that's kind of my unfair advantage in a way, right? So I have a bit of a analytical eye, I'm really passionate about, the art and science of language and communication. So that's really like at my core. And then the kind of second pivot and shift was into copywriting, a lot of copywriting. So I don't really remember now the first time I kind of came across copywriting. It was a bit of a linear shift from translation to copy. But I do know that when I discovered conversion copywriting, there was something that just clicked, right? Because copy isn't just about the words. It's actually about that strategy and communication, helping people achieve things and helping people achieve their goals through language. So I think it was very empowering for me to know that okay, I can help people with their message, get through and communicate to their audience. So yes, I discovered conversion copywriting. I discovered Joanna Weber's courses. So studied her courses, which were almost like a degree. I think I've done a lot of self-education. Did a mastermind with her, so she became a mentor, which was really interesting. And then the final shift now was from copy to messaging, which is leads us to where we are now. And that one was a little bit more like a slow shift and a slow kind of positioning, a sort of repositioning from my part, because I would work on copy for B2B. So I kind of niched into B2B tech and SaaS. And I just would work with a lot of founders and marketers on, they'd come to me for copy, and then all of the stuff that I needed to know to write good copy, that's where we would struggle. That's where we kind of break down. And so what I started doing was doing the messaging work and then the copy, because I needed to do that work to write good copy, So we would sit down and we would look at strategy, your positioning, what do your customers care about? What do they love? What do they hate? Where do you sit? What's your point of view? All of that stuff. And I'd kind of dig into that and plan out this strategy, and then I'd write the copy. And I just realized that was really the impactful piece. And I loved it. So, so over the years, I don't know when that was now, 2-3 years ago, I just thought, I'm going all in on messaging, because I think that piece is overlooked, I guess. And so, here we are today. So I don't know if that was a long origin story, but
perfect.
Kind of
We've heard longer. And the longer the better is really, really interesting to hear.
I can go back and add more detail. No.
It's good to hear how people come, because I think everybody has this idea that there is a certain correct path. Right? Not everybody, but some people have this idea. Right? They have these plans of, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do the thing I actually want to do. Right.
If you told me, even 6-7 years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have. I wouldn't even. If you said like conversion copy, I'd be like, "What the hell is that? Like conversion, like therapy? What's going on?" I wouldn't have a clue. And so there's been a real evolution for me, getting here and just kind of leaning into the things that I love, unpacking different parts of the process and testing along the way. But for me particularly, there is still that thread, right? Yeah. There is still that real common thread of messaging is communication and helping people tell a story and tell a message. Yeah. And that hasn't changed. I've always really believed in like telling a story and cutting through the noise is really important. And some people are really bad at it, and that's okay, because we're all good at different stuff. I work a lot with, tech founders, and so they've built something, and often they're builders, and they just can't nail that messaging piece. And so I love that. Okay, well, this is the thing that I love, and that's all I do. So I love coming in and working with super smart people who just are not really amazing at telling the story, and then we get to like merge our minds and build something great. Yeah.
What made you decide to start? Because you kind of jumped from working at companies on this translation kind of topic, some copywriting, into just going straight for the solopreneur, own business. What was that decision and process like? Why did you decide to do that rather than, say, if I want to go into copywriting or messaging, let's go become, head of content or whatever, something like there would have been the full-time job option.
Right.
What made you decide relatively early on to start on your own?
Me starting out on my own, that happened when I was still in the translation world. Right. And so Lion Words actually was originally my translation agency. Right. And then I ditched that, pivoted completely and went into copy. And then I've repositioned it. It was interesting because I actually gave my company this name, almost knowing that what I was going to start doing, I wouldn't end up doing. Because I would probably, if I was starting now, I would call my company something different, right? Like you guys call the Growth Syndicate, it's really clear, like growth. It's in, what I mean? It's in the name. But when I started Lion Words, I was like, cool, I'm gonna do translation now and marketing translation C. But I knew deep down that I was going to shift and do something bigger, but I just didn't know what that was. And so I kind of kept it quite loose so that I could allow myself this shift. So jumping out to do something by myself, it wasn't really about copy or marketing. It was just that I was done. I'd been working in a company for 4 or 5 years. I really wanted to kind of go and climb the corporate ladder. I actually remember my first interview at that company when, they come and they ask you, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I said, I wanted to be a manager. And they were like, wow, okay. People don't usually say that in their first interview for like some like introductory role. So I think I'd always been very ambitious. But I climbed through the ranks and I just realized there's always layers and there's always people above you and there's always people in charge. And I wanted to decide when I wanted to work, how I wanted to work. And I think, I don't know what it was that just allowed me to make the jump. So I think, it's just working by myself, for myself is just something that I always wanted to do. I'm quite independent. I like being in charge of what I'm doing. And then I still collaborate with people. It's just that I don't have a team per se. I work with, contractors and operators.
How did it go? Because you said you repositioned your Lion's Words, right? You went from translation agency to more the content partner, the messaging. How is that process?
Yeah, tricky, I guess. I think the first was a little bit harder, simply because, it was like one day I do one thing and then the next I do something completely different. That one, I had to kind of remove myself from one industry. Yeah. I tried to straddle the two for a while, but it's really hard to talk about two different things that you do. And I also did the classic thing that I tell companies not to do now, or agencies, we do everything. Yeah. I do editing and copy editing and copywriting and translation. And I do multilingual marketing. And I got that wrong because I was trying to sit on the fence, and try to speak to everyone. And then I reached that point where I realized I can't serve these two different markets. And so I'm going to have to go all the way in. You just rip off the Band-Aid and do it. The shift to where I am now, the work that I really love doing from copy to messaging, that was a little bit simpler. Yeah. I think I made that choice end of 21, where I was cool, messaging, and I'm going all in. And I remember working with the person who actually introduced us, Louis Grenier. I worked with him a little bit on my own positioning. And I remember him saying to me, just go all in on messaging. And now I am. And now everybody's talking about messaging, and everyone's saying they're a messaging strategist. But I remember that no, forget this other piece, really go in and lean into the core.
Yes, it's interesting because messaging I find is quite unique in the sense that I think when you speak to founders, and you can tell me if you've experienced this,
sure,
that there's quite a polarized view, I guess. I think there's going to be founders who think messaging is kind of like a nice to have.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, window dressing, it's nice to have. It's like the brandy, fluffy stuff. But then I also know that messaging is this thing, at least when we approached you at first with Reveal, it was, some see it as this Hail Mary.
Yes.
If I can just change the way I say it, all of those deals I'm losing are going to get closed. All of those people not converting are going to convert. Those people who aren't reading what we're writing, they're going to, and there's not so much space in between, I feel. Tell me if you have a different experience, but there definitely seems to be this kind of crazy dichotomy of either, it's this kind of fluffy, nice thing to have, or this is going to change our entire business. Mm-hmm. And especially when you look at messaging in the context of positioning, these kind of things, positioning, pivot messaging, those are kind of like the Hail Marys of the startup, experience.
Yeah.
How do you experience that? And how do you navigate that? Because I'm guessing you get founders on both sides of the spectrum, probably the latter more likely to employ you or hire your services. But
of course.
How do you experience that?
I mean, I think, isn't it the same across most parts of marketing and marketing even itself, right? You have companies that are they understand the importance of getting that right from the beginning, that, finding product market fit is all about your market and positioning and how you go to market channel, all of that stuff. So I think there are always going to be companies and founders that are one end that really understand what that means and others that don't. That's part of our job as well, with that kind of educational piece. But I do think that within B2B, within tech and SaaS, not only is it just way more important because of how saturated markets are, how much noise there is, how many new companies are popping up and trying to, disrupt spaces. So I think that it's even more important. But I do think that the value is appreciated by founders and marketers a little bit more than, say, in other industries. So yes, some founders, marketers, prospects come to me and they're not quite sure, sometimes not quite sure what impact I can have, but they know it's kind of important. They're trying to figure it out. And then there are others when we work together at Reveal, that you come and you're like, cool, we know that this is critical. Come and help us do it. One thing that I would just kind of touch back on and call you out on there was that you said, it's critical kind of how we say it. But how I see messaging is not really that it's how you say, it's what you say. So my kind of definition of messaging is how you articulate the most important things about your company or your product and why that matters to your audience. So really it's the kind of what you say, what should we be saying about our products, about our services, about the impact, the value, the features of the product, the benefit, and all of that. And then once you have that clarity of like what we should be saying and how we should be showing up in a market, then we can say that in various different ways. And that's the how, and that's, for different channels and copy. So, when you say it like that, every founder understands, shit, of course, that's really important. But sometimes they just can't figure out that this is an important layer before copy.
Absolutely. I like that you picked that up, because that brings me to my next question, which is messaging and positioning. It's very hard to separate the two, right?
Yes.
They are intertwined. When you work with a company, because you don't position yourself as a positioning.
No, I don't. Yeah, that's a purposeful kind of strategic positioning of myself as well. Yeah.
So how do you separate the two in your work?
Yeah.
And what do you do when a company's positioning is not good?
Yeah.
Because I guess that holds you back a lot.
Sure. So I'm a messaging strategist first and foremost, but it's obvious. Messaging is the bridge between your positioning, in the market, what problem you solve for who and how, and then the copy, right? So the words on the page and how you express that message. So obviously I am really focused on helping companies nail this piece, but I straddle both of those. And so sometimes I have to have a foot in positioning, and I do help companies figure out their positioning. Sure. And then often I help execute that messaging when companies need it, right? If they haven't got that in-house marketing team or copywriters to run with it, then sometimes I help bridge that transition. And often we'll really focus on one particular asset, which is the website or the homepage. And so make sure that, cool, now you've actually got an asset with that messaging, and then help them run with it. So I don't like to call myself a positioning consultant, because that isn't, the real focus of the work. And I do believe that, like I say to my clients, you need to lean in on one thing, right? I don't want to be known for 7 things. I want to be known for one thing. So yes, I do bridge the two. I think how I manage that is because I work with sort of 2 types of clients. When I'm working with companies that are a sort of growth stage, then my criteria is you have product market fit. You have product, we're talking like the 1 million to 5 to 10 plus and beyond. You've got traction in the market. You've got customers. Your messaging is working. Your go-to-market channels are all pretty clear. And so now what we're doing is we're taking you from one stage to the next. The messaging that got you here isn't going to get you further. And so we're not really touching on positioning. I'm asking you about it and challenging it slightly, but you should have that pretty much nailed in. And so that's clear. I'm building on those foundations and helping you translate that into a clear what, because there might have been a shift, or, we're addressing change in the market. So for those companies, easy. I don't really touch that. We're building on it and we're running with it. But I do still serve a bit of a smaller segment of the market, which are a little bit earlier stage, right? And with those, they either know that their positioning isn't really relevant, or they think it is. But as soon as I speak to them, I'm like, yeah, we can't work on your messaging until we figure out your positioning. And so then we do a bit of a positioning sprint. So I come in and I kind of do a reduced scope, like, hey, let's workshop this. Let's nail it out. Let's put this into a clear canvas. Let's get aligned so that then I can build on it. Yeah.
How important is differentiation in messaging? Because I think there's a lot of companies that are in, like, I would say, kind of red ocean kind of markets where you have a lot of competitors, but it's really clear what the end user or customer wants.
Yeah.
And okay, you might differentiate on some things that are like nice to have, but not mandatory, something that's like, oh, the customer needs this. So you might have like 5 companies that actually the message is really similar.
Yes.
So how would you position yourself there? Like what messaging wise, how do you make sure that you don't say the same thing as your competitors, or does it actually matter? And then you just have to say something similar to your competitors because that's what the end user needs.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, for me, differentiation is key, but it's a positioning thing, right? And so you can't ask a copywriter or a messaging strategist to could you just come in and sprinkle on some differentiation in our messaging, like Salt Bay, just like sprinkle on, just make us sound a bit different, that doesn't work. I can come in and help you identify, like, is this the thing that, you think this is what makes you different? So then we go out and speak to customers. A big part of my process is really customer focused, doing customer research. I don't really do any projects where you won't let me speak to your customers, or we do buyer research or whatever, right? Whatever that can look like. It can also look at like reviews and surveys and whatever we have access to, sales recordings, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of it's a positioning and messaging element, right? It's, what is the unique features or parts of your product that your customer base actually sees as differentiated and as valuable, and that distinguishes you from everyone else in the market. And then how do we message that? And sometimes it's not that like this one magic thing, like a unique selling point. I find sometimes a hard concept to grasp because most companies don't have one unique selling point. It's very rare. It's very rare nowadays, particularly in software and tech, that you have this one thing about your actual product that distinguishes you. It usually doesn't happen. It's often a combination of different values that for this particular subset in the market that is valuable to them. And so, like April Dunford talks about unique attributes, right, within positioning. And that to me is where your differentiation comes from. And so that's why we need to draw it out, do a bit of kind of hypothesis and then validation with the market to make sure that we're saying the right thing. I think you need to test it as well.
I think a follow-up question on this, because when we're in Dublin, we talk as well to Emma Stratton, and we had a discussion about messaging where she talked about customer research, right? So you talk to customers, and my point was that I think a lot of marketeers are not really good on what questions to ask customers, because it's really easy to mislead, with questions that you're actually guiding towards an answer that you want to hear. Bias. So do you have like a methodology for this? And can you give us an example of a few questions that you ask just to make sure it's relevant?
Yeah, I think, what you're talking about there is that bias, right? And it's a real problem. It's a real challenge, and it's something you definitely need to be aware of. It's one of the reasons that when I come in and work with companies, I say, "Hey, have you spoken to your customers?" And they say, "Yeah," and they share stuff with me, and I'm like, I might use it, but I'm probably going to do my own, because then I look at the questions and the answers, and they're usually just like close-ended. They're close-ended, or they're like, "Oh, did you?" Yeah, and there's so many different parts of the process that are really important. Not only your visual cues, silence, unpacking those questions. So over the years, I've done so many different customer interviews. So what I have kind of built out, I have a bit of a kind of script or a template. So I have a bunch of questions that I always refer to, and then I adapt those for obviously each company and the product. Yeah. But the flow of that always starts with I guess, the simplest way to break it down would be 3 phases: before, during, and after. So I always start with questions like, what was going on in your world, or what was going on in your life that brought you to start searching for a product like ours, right? Again, this is taken from my time in copywriting more so than like messaging, right? But it adapts to the same process. And there, what you want to do is you always want to start that conversation by setting the scene, painting a bit of a picture, getting into their world, because then you relax the other person and they start to think about, where was I? What were we doing? Why were we doing that? And then we start with the before questions. So usually it's things like questions around decision making. So the decision making process, what were you looking for? What was the criteria, etc. Then I'm asking questions usually about those kind of first impressions, because that's really important to understand what the first impressions of your product or your brand are making. Touching on things like objections and hesitations. So, for example, what almost stopped you from hiring us? What almost stopped you from working with us? That's going to really highlight some of those hurdles you needed to get over and that you need to touch on with your messaging. Right? We can maybe come back to this, because not touching on objections in messaging is a huge pet peeve of mine. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, we're the best, Like your prospects have questions and doubts, you have to address them. Then usually I'm asking questions about, so if we've done the before, then it's the now. So, what does your world look like using this product or this service? What was the experience like, etc. Unpacking all of that. And then, of course, the future state. So then you're finally getting to questions around outcomes, measurements, impacts that you've seen. But I always also ask questions about value and differentiation. So, how did they see you in the market? What would they say if they were to recommend you to someone else? The classic things that often you ask similar questions when you're putting together case studies, right? Or kind of testimonials, but you just kind of want to go through that whole journey. And then also making space to follow up. If I said to you, what was going on in your world before you bought this project management software, and you're like, oh my God, like our projects were just chaotic. It was a mess. If you just move on to the next question, sounds helpful, but later, like, what does chaotic actually mean? What does the mess mean? And so usually I'll ask questions that are quite visual. So things like, what did that mess look like? Or if I was a fly on the wall, what would I see? And then you're going to get that language, that sticky stuff that's really helpful for messaging.
Nice.
And I want to ask about kind of, things companies do well and badly and, your pet peeves. We'll get to that in a second. But this makes me think of, I think, a really important topic when you're talking about anything that's positioning, branding, messaging, and that's stakeholders. Now, we are external providers, so we have a huge advantage, which is usually when people come to us and actually put money on the table to hire us and you for whatever services it is people offer, you're always listed to more as an external, and you have a certain amount of credit when you start, right? And that can expire after a while, but run out. But essentially, people listen to you, and people need to be kind of convinced of the sort of thing they're paying you for before they hire you. But we also have a lot of people who work internally in companies. Maybe they're not messaging specialists, but they want to tackle messaging. And maybe you also have some service providers who also bump into this, because I know we do. For the record, we don't do big messaging projects with clients, but we do, when we start with a company, try to make sure that there is some basis in place. So we need to kind of check, okay, if we're going to do this, ICP, positioning, and basic messaging. And when I say messaging, in this case, we are much more on the copy practical side. Like if we're going to launch campaigns, if we're going to revamp the website, if we're going to do certain things, if we're going to do like a multi-pronged ABM campaign, whatever, I need to make sure that the foundation is somewhat manageable. And even then, very often what we see is certain stakeholders having very strong opinions. In German, we have an expression which translated means, dangerous half knowledge. Like you know enough to get involved, but you don't know enough to actually be helpful. It's like a dangerous level of knowledge to have. A lot of stakeholders have that. So we've worked with companies that then come to us. Somebody comes to us and says, I made this amazing piece of content. We have to push this front and center. And it's just doesn't hit the mark. Nobody else in the company agrees with it. It just doesn't make sense. I'm guessing with messaging, you get that a lot. People will come in who have strong opinions. So maybe you do and to tie back to what you were just talking about, maybe you talk to customers and they tell you the truth. And that truth does not match what the company how the company currently sees it. And, when you're renovating a house, nobody wants to hear that you have to redo the foundation, right? You want to get straight to the sexy stuff like painting and furniture and all this kind of stuff. So I'm guessing you probably get some pushback sometimes from founders when you talk to their customers and the customer says, well, this is how we see it. And the founder goes, no. Maybe they don't want to do the full revamp. Maybe they just have a biased perspective. Maybe they have tunnel vision.
Sure.
How do you handle stakeholders who have it wrong, but you need to get them on board?
So, a big part of my work is stakeholder wrangling, I guess, mainly because my process, the way that I work, I make sure that we always involve different, leadership, like all of the kind of C-suite. So a prerequisite to work with me is that the CEO or the founder is involved. So far, so good, but I don't work with companies where it's just the head of marketing and we haven't involved everyone else. So I kind of say that up front that we need to, because messaging isn't just a marketing thing, right? It's not just a marketing concern. No. Messaging is a company concern, a leadership concern, and so we need buy-in. So I think my process there helps me because what I do upfront is set expectations that we need all of these people involved. So it's pretty clear who is involved, and we're not changing that team. We're not having people jump in and jump out, ideally. So, if it's, we've got, CEO or our founder, depending on the size, but usually CEO, we've got the head of marketing, we've got head of revenue, let's say, head of customer success, head of sales, right? And we're all in the room, and that's pretty clear. I also think that setting expectations of what my process looks like upfront is key. It's a bit easier for me externally because I come in and everyone wants to work on it and they're like, cool, what's your process? We're going to follow it. But I think that this also, anyone who's listening who wants to lead a messaging project internally, take this too, right? Set expectations of what each step is going to look like, who's involved in each step, and, when there are touch points and when there aren't. So having that process definitely helps me. Additionally, I would say I establish right at the front roles. So I use, some people call it a DAISY or a RACI, so a responsibility matrix. So on that first initial kickoff call, so DAISY is driver, approver, contributor, and informed. And so everyone who's in that room, there is, the driver is me, because I am making sure that we get to the end of the project. And there's one approver. There is not two. And so on that call, when the CEO is there and the head of sales and head of revenue and the head of marketing, I'm asking them, who is the one approver? And so the CEO might say, which they usually do, I'm going to be involved, but, I trust the head of marketing is the approver. Cool. And so from now on, I know that it's them. It might be a different person.
Sorry to interrupt, but doesn't it ever happen that the CEO goes, this person's the approver, and then you finish and they go like, no?
No, it hasn't. And maybe I've been lucky so far but it hasn't. It's worked pretty well. And I think because I'm pretty hard on that. And so I do push back with every delivery and every meeting that we have. I do say, hey, remember to filter your feedback through and share it, but the approver has the final thing. A couple of times I've had to come back and say, hey, you've shared a few different comments. They don't align. Who am I running with? And then oh, cool, let's check. And they have a conversation internally and they say, lead with this one. And so I put that on you when you work with me so that I don't have to. Like if you two disagree and you share this with me, that's why I've said, okay, but who's the final approver? Because you guys need to also figure this out. And then we know that it's this opinion and then I can work with you on it. So having that, responsibility matrix set up at the beginning definitely helps. And then the example that you touched on about speaking to customers, we decided that they've said this, we need to shift, deliver it, and then we go back on it. Usually that doesn't happen either because we have another meeting and we touch base based on that. So I always deliver, depending on what format, but I will kind of deliver a report and we'll do a meeting looking at those insights and say, cool, this is what I heard. Spoke to the market. They said X, Y, Z. This means, there's the misalignment with our messaging. Here's what we're thinking. Here's what that could look like. And I get buy-in there. And that's where we address those concerns. But usually, sometimes the customer research, it always brings up something, but it's never so left field. It's always a couple of steps to the left or a couple of steps to the right. It's not that you thought you were, I don't know, you thought you were a sales tool and they're telling you your marketing tool. Like that's not the kind of crazy things that are going to come up. It's a shift that sometimes we need to get behind. But so maybe I'm lucky. I don't know. Maybe I've just worked with brilliant clients. Like you guys were a brilliant client, but you were the approver. Right.
But we were small as well.
We were very small at that stage. Right. Of course. But, wrangling and making sure that, okay, whose opinion is sort of has priority helps.
I do wonder if that is also, a lot of that also is the benefit of being an external. I think there's just this different status you have when you come in as an external.
Perhaps, but I have to as well, because otherwise the project will derail and I'm here to help you. And if I can't guide you through, like I'm a facilitator, you guys have all this knowledge that I need to extract and I need to extract it in a structured way. If I don't, also my work is horrible. Right. So I need to have processes and I need to help you communicate with each other, discuss those, push back. I wonder
if you could even do it internally. It'd be interesting. Maybe we should do a LinkedIn post because I've seen a lot of companies where the marketing team makes messaging and the rest of the company's like, whatever. I've seen that a lot. And I've seen a lot of companies where people like stakeholders will agree in a call and then disagree out when they're not together. Yeah. So they'll agree and then you'll send, you'll be like, cool, version 1 of whatever deliverable. Yeah. No, don't like it. No, don't like it. Back and forth, get them together. No, it's totally fine. Let's make these changes. So I think being external does help because it forces, especially, and I think maybe this is I think it's important to be expensive. This sounds weird, but I think
like Stella Artois, reassuringly expensive. That was a famous tagline for a long time.
I'm not the biggest fan of Stella Artois, so but
from a marketing, from a branding perspective,
it's great. Reassuringly expensive is a good line.
You.
I think because it's one of those things where obviously you have to justify why something's. And I'm not going out here and saying that you're expensive, by the way, so I can't judge that. But we're not cheap.
Again,
right?
it's the value for some people.
Depends on the companies, yeah.
Some people I really am, and some people I'm not. Yeah.
But I think that's the kind of side benefit that people often ignore is that when you're expensive, people listen to you.
Yeah.
Right? So if you would charge $2,000 a month, the CEO could totally ignore your process and it doesn't matter. But if the CEO sees this as a big enough problem to pay, I don't know, 10, 20, 30K a month, they're much more likely to listen to you.
Course.
They're much more likely to give you the resources you need.
I mean, this is an agency consultancy. This really comes down to your authority. This comes down to authority building and respect from the beginning as well.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of individual contributors, or freelancers that really have to work on that, because if you're being hired for your expertise, you have to respect that. But again,
it's an unfair advantage almost as an external that you have. I mean, there are lots of downsides to hiring externals, and we're an external party, right? We say that, but there are downsides, of course. But there are some upsides. You decided to niche down on messaging. Was that scary to go so niche?
Was it? I'm trying to remember. I don't know.
Because when you did it wasn't like this thing where everybody was talking about messaging.
It didn't feel like it at the time. No, now it definitely does. Like I feel like I see and hear messaging everywhere. Messaging has always been a thing. And I mean, for example, you had Emma on your podcast, right? Emma Stratton of Punchy. We do very similar work. She's a messaging strategist. She's been doing it for I don't know, 10 years, 9 years, something like that. So it's, messaging has been a thing for a long time. But I do remember when I was starting to go all in, that there weren't that many people that were all in. It felt a little bit scary, I think, any little shift. But again, there's been shifts since then as well. And it's, I touch on the positioning piece. I do touch on the copy piece. We do create copywriting assets. But leaning in, I guess also there was a bit of a weight off my shoulders and a relief, because I don't know, the smaller you go, the narrower you go, the more that I could focus on that and just lean into it and learn everything about it and refine my process and kind of productize it, time and time again. I have the same steps and do the same process with everyone. And I love it. I think it's always a little bit scary, but
you also focus on B2B, right? So you only do B2B.
Yeah.
What is the main difference you see between B2B and B2C when it comes to messaging?
So I haven't worked with B2C for a very long time, probably since, I've written all sorts of copy, but a long time ago. Yeah. So I've done things, from ads and emails, but I don't do all of that now. It's tough. I guess maybe something, a willingness to be creative, I would say. Maybe the sort of creativity piece. B2B tends to feel like they need to be a bit more stuffier. I think if we think about the word professional, right, this just comes up a lot in B2B. There's a bit of a fear of testing things out. It's weird because tech companies are willing to test things out everywhere else, but when it comes to marketing and messaging, they're like, oh, we need to follow everybody else, and no one else is saying this, and we need to follow these frameworks and templates and everything. So probably that. But again, I'm not the best person to ask that because I've just been working with B2B now.
You mentioned like objection handling is really important, right? So Clément and I both worked at 3D Hubs in the past, manufacturing, working with engineers. So you're working in a space where your target user knows your subject matter that you're focusing on a million times better than you ever will. And there's massive risks involved, right? I think Max said it on our podcast. He said, B2B is like buying with responsibility, right? You have a ton of responsibility. If you buy the wrong thing, the stakes are very high. That's where objections become really important.
But I agree and I disagree with this, because I think when people compare B2B and B2C, often they compare like someone in B2B who's going to buy like whatever Salesforce that's going to cost them $200,000 a year versus buying a T-shirt at Zara. Well, actually, buying a house as an individual, is more of a B2C purchase, you also can go wrong. And you have obstacles. You have you have users. You also have people. Your banker can tell I cannot give you that much. So it's this middle ground where I think, we're in a bit off topic, but, where actually there are, B2B and B2C, it doesn't have to be that different, in my opinion.
No, but I think, for example, if you're selling a house, you're not going to make the messaging like unlock the future you, like that. You're just going to go like, this house got 6 bedrooms and it's nice and it's got a good location and it costs less than the house next door. Like, like obviously I'm exaggerating, but I think the importance of clarity in high. I think you're completely right. But I
wasn't talking about messaging. I was talking about your point before. Yeah, messaging.
Absolutely. But I think to tie back to messaging, the higher the risk, the more practical you need to be.
Sure.
And I guess B2B purchases generally are higher risk taken as a whole than B2C purchases.
100%.
There are B2C purchases that are also high risk, but most B2B purchases are high risk. Right?
I disagree there, but
I think most of them are high
B2B
risk.
buying and B2C buying is very different, right? There is, I think, and that's what, showing up in your messaging, there are more loops, like me buying a product, even if it is expensive, even if it is, I don't know, like a £600 television or whatever, I don't know. It's a lot, but it's the impact of that decision is different than when you are a B2B buyer buying on behalf of an organization. So it is a different layer to deal
by
with.
type form is different, right? Like I know there's also
depends on what you buy. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Depends, I think, on the deal size mostly, or the impact you have. Yeah. Cool.
I have a last question before we jump to the next section.
Sure.
How do you approach your own brand and your own messaging?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel you can take that same neutrality? Like, is there an advantage of being? I guess there's an advantage of being neutral. So you can always look at somebody else's website and go like, and I'm not talking about messaging, but you can always look at somebody else's stuff and go like, I do this differently. How do you approach that for yourself?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to have the same clarity. I always say that my advantage is that perspective. It's also why I don't really do like project retainers. Like everything that I do currently is coming in on project basis, because at the beginning I do have that different kind of view, right? I come in, I don't know your business, I don't know your customers, so I can be kind of quite neutral. Then we unpack it, then I get to know your business, and then by the end of it, like I'm an expert, right? But then I leave, right?
Yeah.
And I don't usually kind of stay on to kind of to work and create emails and landing pages and all that. And it is the same with, founders. I often talk about this concept I call the founder funk. It's like, you're inside the jar, so you can't read the label, and you just know everything. You know everything inside out about your product and your service. And so it's so hard to just take a step back and be like, what we're saying doesn't make sense. Of course, this applies to me. I have the advantage of, understanding messaging and knowing the approach, but of course it's hard. It's really, really hard. When I was reshifting to like messaging and launching Lion Words in its current version and like writing the copy and building out that messaging was so tough. So yeah, of course I struggle with it. I know kind of how to approach it, and I have like, what is it? What do you eat? Eat your own dog medicine or something? I can't remember the phrase. Yeah, dog food, something like that. I think I was mixing 2 different idioms then. So I have done that. I have gone out and spoken to my own my customers, and I've interviewed them, and I've asked them, done all these processes and built out that. So I have done that. I haven't done it as regularly as I would like. So right now we're kind of end of 24, Q4 24 going into 25. And right now I'm at a phase where I also kind of want to redo that, because I think that my market has shifted a little bit. I think perceptions have shifted a little bit, and I'm starting to see different feedback when different kind of use cases and needs when prospects are coming to me. And so I also kind of want to unpack that to make sure that I'm speaking to that with my clients. So yeah, long story short, it's tough. I'm not exempt from this, but I do it myself, right? I do try to evaluate my own positioning myself.
I guess you also have to shift from convincing everybody, why messaging is important. Now the market is kind of caught up and everyone's talking about messaging, to going like, hey, I'm one of the OGs.
Right.
I'm one of the OGs.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that April said is when you have, if you're one of the incumbents, you're always at an advantage, always. But if you have a pesky number 2, number 3, number 4 in the market that acts like the incumbent and starts to look like the incumbent, that's when it gets dangerous. And you've been doing this a while, so I guess
exactly. Yeah, there's definitely a shift in the market. Within SaaS as well, we've seen it with budgets. Budgets have gone up and then they've been slashed, and then there's we're trying to do more, and then we're trying to handle things internally, and then you have a big section of the market that's like, can't we use AI to do all of this stuff? So they were. It's like they were never a good fit. Now they're not a good fit. So now it's this part of the market you know? So yeah, when the market shifts, your positioning shifts, and when your positioning shifts, your messaging needs to shift as well. So we'll see. Maybe we'll see how that. I can't say too much about how my messaging is evolution, but we'll see. Hopefully,
when might we see something?
Maybe, I don't know, next quarter. I'm kind of, I don't think there's going to be a huge shift, but I'm sort of at that
lemonade.
I'm at that end of year review phase. Like I'm quite a cyclical person, so I like the kind of January to December reflection and starting the year. Like
that's good.
Too. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Nice. So let's jump into next section. So this is the fixed Q&A. So it's 4 questions we ask every guest. Okay. So the first one is
yes or no, or
no. You can. So it's short answers, so you can develop a little bit, but it's a bit shorter answers.
All right.
It's not rapid fire.
No.
Okay.
Okay. All
right.
So what's a controversial opinion that you have?
Ooh. So I've been asked this before, and I think my opinions need to be more controversial. I've realized this recently. Like I'm not super controversial. I would say everything that is controversial, I don't think it should be. That's the problem. So. Probably, I think most companies don't have a copy problem. What they actually have is a messaging problem. And that's what they need to fix first. I think that so many companies come in and think that tweaking their copy, looking at headlines, just rewriting homepages, like that's enough. And it's really just the words on the page and we just need to say this differently. Yeah. That's not what your problem is. The problem is the foundations are broken on your house and you're trying to repaint the walls and you don't have clarity on like what makes you different in the market. You don't have clarity on your real user needs, how you're speaking to them. And that's the problem. You don't even know what you stand for, what your point of view is. Like you think you do and you're copying everyone else. And so I don't know if that's controversial. I don't think it is, but I do say it and I get a bit of pushback. So
we'll take it.
Yeah, it's a good one. What's your biggest fuck up?
Ooh, work or life?
You could choose, but I guess 10 more towards the work.
What is my biggest? I don't know. I'm terrible because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and so this is going to sound really cheesy, but I don't think I've failed enough. I don't think I've had enough big fails. Because sometimes I don't make big jumps or big leaps. I'm a bit of a kind of tentative mover and I'm much of a planner and I do a lot of processes. And so all of my fuck ups are kind of like little ones that I kind of address with like marketing or with clients. And so, I don't know if that's like it's like when you go to an interview and they're like, what's your terrible skill? And you're just like, oh, I'm too organized.
I'm too organized.
So I know I'm going to sound like a dick, but honestly, I don't think, and I think that's a problem of mine that I don't fail enough. And those around me and, colleagues and friends, they know that. And they're like, Diane, you need to make some big leaps. So that's a challenge of mine.
Good answer.
I don't know if you're going to take that answer or not.
You said really well. We can tell you messaging.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Label on the jar right there. No, it's good. It makes a lot of sense. I think if you're not failing, if you don't have any big fuck ups, then that does question. Then you do need to question if you're taking enough risk.
Right. Yeah. And it's a challenge of mine. And I've always said that openly. And this is also the challenge of, running business by yourself because you have a lot of pressure and it's all on you. Yeah. And so, sometimes taking those big risks are tough. But yeah.
Cool.
I'm not admitting to any big fuck ups. I'm going to keep.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. So, who do you learn from the most?
Ooh, who? So, like one person?
Yeah. Let's go for one person.
I don't know. Recently I tried to look kind of outside my industry to kind of widen my view a bit. But if I'm thinking about my work to date, I think the person I've learned the most from is definitely Joanna Weber, right? So in terms of copywriting has been the foundation of my kind of education for moving into messaging. Also from the business side of things, so how I've built and structured my kind of solo consultancy. But yeah, she's just a brilliant mind and is a mentor of mine, and I love her work. And I always recommend resources on copy to businesses. So nice. Probably, yeah.
A good answer, perfect.
Yeah.
And the last one is, what is your favorite tool for 2024?
I'm not a huge tool user. Let me think.
Even better. Like the best answers come from the people who don't use a lot of tools.
Give me a second here to go through my tech stack because it's kind of small, but what am I using? I'm not a huge fan of any of my tools.
We've heard that before.
Every marketer is always like, I don't care about the tool.
There's nothing that completely transforms my, man, I hate it because it's classic. I'm a huge Loom user, right? My business wouldn't exist without Loom, but boring. Like everybody knows that. Project management, I could live without everything. I use ClickUp, but whatever.
That's a testimonial right there.
I use ClickUp or whatever.
I could use whatever. That's great.
It's terrible. Okay, like, but it's not in, I don't know. I'm actually, this is terrible because I want to shift providers. So like transcription software and like recording all my customer interviews, recording all of my sales calls and going through them. That's a key tool in my process because it's a key tool for me for Lionwords, analyzing my whole sales process and optimizing that. And it's also key for when I'm doing customer interviews for clients and helping me with those insights. So that category, because I don't even want to call out the tool, that category I think is important. There are a lot of players and I'm interested. There are a lot of interesting things going on there. I'm always discovering new tools. Right now I use Otter and it's a bit like legacy. It's okay. It works. I like that it's interesting. They've built in an AI feature that I actually love and use. Now they're leading with it. I don't think they should. But I'm considering shifting to a new tool. So I can't say who, because I don't know when, but that probably is one of the tools that is the most important for the work that I do. So that was, I don't know, that didn't really answer what you...
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Side note, can you look at like a website without just seeing the messaging? Or do you always just see the messaging? Like, can you just like
copy
on a website?
About the AI?
No, but generally, like, do you ever like go on a website and just like read and go like, oh, cool? Or do you go like...
No, I see. It's like six. I see 10.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I can't. I see language and grammar mistakes and messaging and shit marketing everywhere. Yeah. Like when I close I see it. I see things on billboards. Nightmares. I see typos. I read menus. And I'm like, they've translated that terribly. Yeah.
Oh,
badly translated menus. That's a good one.
They drive me insane.
We have another segment that we do every week, every episode. And that's the facepalm of the kudos of the week. So something that we want to give a shout out to, and something that we want to do. Exactly. Something we want to do a shout out for, something we want to do a kind of diss a little bit.
Okay.
And
I like dissing things.
No, but it's okay. But sometimes
I'm nice, I'm kind.
Yeah, but sometimes people do bad things and then they need to be called out.
Okay.
I think we have a very similar one because
I'll go first. I'll go first on that one.
No, because if you guys go first, then I haven't got anything.
If you steal ours, then we'll edit it.
Otherwise, we'll just all discuss it. You go first. Guest always goes first.
Right? I mean, ladies first, guest first. You know, come on. I traveled to Amsterdam for this. Let me go first. All right. So kudos or facepalm? Which
whatever you want.
Whatever you want.
Let's start positive. Let's start with the kudos. So I'm here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands for the first time. So, and I've just been at a conference called Conversion Hotel, or the conference known as Conversion Hotel. They've changed their name a bunch, led by Ton Westling. That's not how I pronounce the name that you said. How do I pronounce his name? Westling. Okay, sorry, Ton. Anyway, so it was an experimentation conference. A lot of optimizers, CROs, not revenue, conversion rate optimizers. And it was really cool, really, really cool. A lot of the whole experimentation industry was there. It was nice for me to kind of step out my box as well and not just be surrounded by marketers. I'm always surrounded by a lot of founders and marketers. So it was really interesting to kind of widen their view on messaging. Cool. And it was a really cool conference. So kudos to those guys. They've been doing it for 10 years and I'd never heard of it. And it's awesome. Nice community. Cool.
Nice.
Kudos to them. So facepalm. This is tough. I'm not going to tear apart. People might think that I'm going to go tear apart messaging. I'm not going to do that. Right now we're end of November. So there's something that was happening this week, that's kind of pissed me off a little bit. And it is the Jaguar rebrand.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. But let me give you my perspective on this. I'm not going to go into it too deep because also kind of time-wise. But I'm not really annoyed about the rebrand. It's the rebrand itself. So I don't know if your listeners are mainly like B2B and SaaS, they might not be aware, but like brand marketers lost their shit and their proverbial minds. And when I did see this rebrand video, I did think, wow, this is weird. Don't understand it. I don't think this is good. But you know what it is that I want to do the facepalm to? It's the incessant need to comment on every company's strategy without insight, without information, without knowing what they did. So many people were saying like an agency did it. I think apparently it was an internal thing. Sure, there's going to be impact. I don't know. I just think we have all become, we're content creators as well, and we all have opinions, and now everyone wants to share their opinion, and it's always like dunking on companies without, talking about things with a bit of retrospect and insight. And so maybe it's the world that I'm in, and maybe it's the people that I am connected to on LinkedIn and on socials and stuff like that. But it just gets a bit tiring when like one company does something and everyone like jumps on it. So it's not necessarily the rebrand that I want to shit on here, like do the facepalm. It's a bit the dialogue. So I don't know if that's your take, but yeah. That's my facepalm of the week.
Yeah, makes sense.
Let's just talk about this rebrand for 2 minutes, because my kudos and facepalm were both on the rebrand.
Hey,
was for me as well.
Right, so who's the kudos to Jaguar yourself?
Yeah, I think I would give for me the kudos to Jaguar, just by the fact of their sales were going down. They tried something, so they totally, they're looking at the future. I have no idea if it's going to work or not. Again, because I'm not a Jaguar customer and I'm not an expert in the car industry, but everybody's talking about it.
Yes.
And I think they just did basically a logo change, right? A small introduction, like what they did on the website, like a small content piece, and then a 30-second video. Mm-hmm. And I think people lose their shit around it.
Yeah.
And for me, I think the facepalm here is I saw a lot of people. So everybody was, first of all, surfing that wave on LinkedIn, right? Because it's trendy. So everybody wants to talk about it. But I saw people on LinkedIn that I followed for a lot of years, like 50K plus followers, supposed to be kind of those marketing gurus or brand people gurus that I'd really like short-sighted about the whole thing. So they compare like this little material we had to, so they were like, oh, the brand sucks because they changed the logo. And I'm like rebranding plus also a new marketing strategy doesn't go down to a logo. Right, so I was a bit bothered about the short side. You like it or not, it's fine, give your opinion. Right, yeah. I was just a bit disappointed by this. Mm-hmm. And also a lot of people that commented actually have no idea about Jaguar because they didn't care about today. Right. They're not customers. Yeah, they're not experts in the automotive industry. Right, yeah. And they had no idea where the automotive industry is going. So maybe, it's going to EV and then they have to change, the target audience are not going to buy them anymore because they're old, probably white Jews in Europe. So, they had to do a change. So I think that's for me the big facepalm.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
So we don't have an hour, Ferdy.
No,
we don't have an hour.
I'm going to pivot this a little bit away. Bottom line, my opinion on this is I thought the rebrand was shit, but I'm not necessarily the target customer.
Right.
So I'm not there. I cannot judge it from do you have a growth syndicate? No, that's his. Never mind. I thought this was your laptop and you had one of our stickers on it. And I was like, that's cool. Sorry. So first of all, I thought it sucked, but I'm probably not the target audience. Yes. I thought, Jaguar was kind of a cool brand, but I liked it for being old posh English cars, right? So, and I totally get that a lot of people who admire the brand for that are annoyed that it's shifting away.
Yes.
Then you have all of the critics who came in and they judged it. I mean, personally, if you ask me, I can't judge the rebrand, but this is a company that's struggling because they really haven't innovated much. Mm-hmm. They haven't built many new cars. The cars that they built have always lagged behind on everything digital, practical. Mm-hmm. They struggle because their cars aren't innovative. Mm-hmm. And now their whole direction is we're going to innovate and go all in on EV. That's going to be interesting. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Maybe they have a whole new engineering team. Maybe they have an entire new, I don't know. So I can't judge it practically. I can go I don't like it. I found all the people commenting really passionately annoying, but I found all the people making LinkedIn posts talking about how people shouldn't share their opinions about this if they don't know what they're talking about, just as annoying. No, we asked you, so I don't count you in this now. Yeah. What you just said, I've seen so many posts all these armchair critics, what the fuck? You're on social media for a reason.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And I find that this is a general thing I'm seeing in marketing. People go lead generation is dead. Focus on demand generation. And people go you can't generate demand. Demand is either there or it's not. And it's people just going
just talking to each other.
And it's just this semantic stuff. And it's just semantic bullshit of just people I'm just tired of the non-practical, the theoretical debates.
Interesting.
Because I feel like people are kind of done with politics, and they're now channeling that political opinion passion, theoretical passion into
made
business.
its way into B2B.
But whenever I see people with these over theoretical, like, well, technically this, I'm like, and I get roped in. I start commenting, and I'm like, I delete more comments per day than I write.
I've done that before.
Yeah. So that's kind of that's my general take. Like, kind of kudos to people for trying something new, and kudos to people for sharing their opinion, but also facepalm for people for trying something new, and facepalm to them for sharing their opinion.
Wait, you got way too. You shouldn't be allowed to do that one, but yeah, you're on too many lines there. But
it's just, I don't know.
I'm with you. So, I mean, the thing with me is, I said I was a bit annoyed about just so much dialogue about it and everyone talking about it. But then,
I agree.
But then also, like you said you didn't like you shouldn't, and then other people commenting on others. I think it's just, we need to remember, we don't need to comment on everything, and we don't need to write everything. So I saw all of this happening, and I could have been like, I could have commented and said, well, you don't have all of this insight, but like, is it going to help me? Probably not. Just move on with my life.
If you're making a post saying how people shouldn't tell people what to do, that's telling people what to do.
Right.
And that's kind of like the essence of it. So I found that a little bit strange. Anyways, moving on.
Yes.
I'm probably not going to buy a Jaguar car. Anyways, it's not something that's in my...
Just one last thing there. I did see quite a few people that were like, I've never, ever thought about Jaguar my entire life. Never thought about wanting a car. Now I want one. And obviously there were like, there were a lot of people who are being stupid, like, I want a big one now. I hope they release, to match the ad. But anyway, so it might work for them.
There you have it.
Let's move on.
There you have it.
Time will tell.
Yes.
We always ask our guests to comment on a LinkedIn post. And the one we've shared here, for those watching, it'll pop up on the screen.
Nice.
Is that you asked Claude AI to write a B2B SaaS homepage.
Yes. Yeah, that was fun.
Let's keep it brief, but generally,
Yes.
What was that experience like? And what is your takeaway on what role AI can, should, or shouldn't play in messaging and copywriting?
Whew, okay, that's not short, but let's try. So for a bit more context, for anyone who isn't going to check out the actual post, I did 2 very simple prompts, right? This wasn't a real project of like trying to prompt it really well. I literally just said, like, write a B2B SaaS website using like the classic general cliche structure, like write it, and then just write a B2B SaaS homepage. And then the second prompt was, put it in a low fidelity wireframe that follows like the normal structure. That was it, 2 prompts. Clearly it's awesome, by the way. I use it quite a lot. And what it created, the output, is, depending on your point of view, either like hilarious or scary or like amazing, right? Because what it did produce was this, I got, unlock your operational workflow, but basically headlines, cross headlines, generic like kind of copy that you see everywhere, that you do see everywhere on B2B SaaS websites. And so what this should show you, and what I've taken away from this, is that if with like 7 words and 30 seconds, I can generate copy that reads like this, like so many websites out there, companies, if your website looks like that, you should be worried, because the bar is so low to create and write copy that is generic, that is passable, that is okay, right? Because I just said, for a fictional SaaS product, and it was where there was a lot of streamline, improve your process, you can generate XYZ, it's AI powered, but stuff that made sense. Like it made sense, but it was so, vague, generic, but that's what companies sound like. And so I think it just shows that, this is what's the word that I'm looking for here? This is the database that we're working with, right? This is
garbage in, garbage out.
The garbage in, garbage out. This is the input that we're working with here. And so I guess let's start with, copywriters and messaging strategists. If you're creating this kind of stuff, you should be scared. Companies that are, wanting to appear outwardly like this, great, go for it. Anyone who actually wants to really speak to, your customers in a human way and really talk about the value that you're delivering, like, you really need to step really and take a long, hard look at, like, what is your strategy? What are you really about? Because it's so easy. It's never been easier. I could have got that website up in like 5 minutes. I think I said it took me an hour or two to create the carousel. Like, took me longer to do that than like a full homepage website, like to put that together in Canva. So yeah, I don't know. I could look at different angles, but that was kind of my general takeaway. And I think at the end of that post, I just said, looking through, if you've got any of these phrases, right? And it's not just the sort of generic buzzwordy stuff. It's also the placeholder copy and things that everyone does, right? It's the, here's what our customers say. That which is a cross headline above the testimonial section on every website, because everyone just says like, our customers are saying this. And so it's like, this is placeholder copy. This is generic stuff. These are all the best practices that everybody has heard from somewhere and now has implemented. And so like, look at your website and make sure, is it telling a story, or are you just like really filling boxes and using templates? Like, the era of the template needs to be over, because everybody can use a template in 2 seconds now. So yeah, that was a rant. I don't know. Sorry.
Very good. Spot on.
That's good. Let's move then to the last section.
There's another one.
But this is rapid fire, okay? So you have to choose one or two options, or like 1-2 word answers.
Let me get in the zone.
Okay? Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. In messaging, what's better, clarity or creativity?
Clarity.
Messaging versus positioning, what is harder?
Messaging.
Should we care about headline length? Yes or no?
Okay, but there's a caveat there. Yes.
Okay.
But it's rapid fire, so I'm not going to expand.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you should, but not for the reason that you think you should. Do you want me to expand on that or not?
Go for it.
Okay. So you should never optimize for short, we don't want these 3-word punchy headlines. I hear so many people coming and looking for punchy, choppy copy. I don't even know what that really means. I guess you just mean short. Length doesn't matter. Don't optimize for short and don't optimize for long. But that doesn't mean that length doesn't matter. What I always say, and I think, who was it? It was like a copywriting OG. I don't know if it's Joseph Sugarman or whoever it was, but it said, it's not that. I'm going to come back to you with the right person afterwards. Use as many words as you need to get your message across, right? And so when your buyer is in an earlier stage of awareness, you need to use more words to express what you're about. If your product is more complex, right, there are so many different factors that affect length. So length of headlines and copy, yes, it does matter, but not for the reason that most people realize. You're never trying to reduce or lengthen. You need to understand where you sit in the market, and that will affect how long your copy is.
Well, that's perfect.
Sorry, I'm feeling really angry about this now. I don't know why.
It's nice because it's linked to the next question. So in messaging, short and punchy or detailed and descriptive?
That's not fair.
You have to pick one.
That's not fair. I have to pick one? Okay, so long and descriptive.
Perfect.
Okay.
Best way to test if your messaging works?
Ask buyers. Ask buyers and ask customers.
One company that is killing it at messaging right now.
Okay, so I've said this before, but you asked me. I've said it before. Can I say the same one?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't know. It's boring though. I mean, so Butterdocs are doing a great job. I don't know in terms of their results, but and from an external eye, it is very clear that they are doing the right things on their homepage, for example, and within their messaging. Butterdocs, they're an alternative to Google Docs, and they call that out really well. They really speak about their product in a way that makes sense about like the product, the features, the benefits, what it means. They positioned against an incumbent. So yeah, I think they're doing a great job. There's a few others, but I'll leave with them. Has anyone else said them?
No?
The
first one.
All right, cool.
Okay, a book that you recommend?
Well, I talked about this. I did a talk. I was speaking at a conference this weekend, talking about doing customer research to help you figure out your messaging. There's actually a book, I think a few copywriters know about it, but beyond that, not really many. Jen Havis, she's a messaging strategist and copywriter, and she wrote a book called Finding the Right Message. And it's quite a practical book on, practical frameworks of speaking to customers, how to figure out your messaging, and how to turn that into great copy. So I think that more people should read that book, actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the last question is, who do you think we should invite to our podcast?
Okay, but you have the added factor of being in Amsterdam, so I need to think of someone within the vicinity, or
no, it doesn't really matter.
We'll find them.
Said on the creepy way. We're going to put Liam Neeson.
Oh, I didn't know you were going to ask me this one. I'm terrible here. I don't know. Who have I heard on podcasts that's interesting? I don't know. I don't know. This is
doesn't
tough.
matter. We'll script that.
Okay, no, I don't know. Okay, so within my world, within the world of messaging and copy, someone who I think has really interesting opinions and approach to this stuff, kind of similar. We have a lot of similar opinions, so maybe it's not great in that sense. But Eden Binani is really brilliant, and she has worked with a lot of B2B SaaS companies as well. I think she's got a lot of
nice,
opinions.
perfect,
Yeah,
Cool.
Good.
Yeah, my microphone's plugged out now because my whole setup has just.
Do you want to talk here a little bit?
Diane, is there anything you'd like to share with people before we wrap up?
Work on your messaging. No, I don't know. Nothing really.
Plug.
Yeah, plug. Well, I guess if I talk about messaging, positioning, copy a lot. I talk about best practices, how to do this, my process a lot on LinkedIn. So I guess definitely connect with me over there, follow me there, say hi as well, because I actually kind of like to have conversations with people about this stuff. And then if people want to know more about Lionwords and what I do and how I work with B2B SaaS companies on their messaging, then they can reach out to me at lionwords.com and check out what I do over there.
Perfect. Then thank you very much, Diana, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was good fun.
Thank you very much.
Like a singer there, like Barry White. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go for Elvis there, but
yeah. Okay.